This is the War Room Roundtable podcast, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant businessmen and women on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on the road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their successes into your life and business. The War Room Roundtable is brought to you by your hosts, Jason Miller, CEO of Strategic Advisor Board, and Phillip Lanos, CEO of Own the Rhythm, and former podcast host for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine. Thank you for tuning into the War Room. Welcome to the War Room. Joe, how are you?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good, man. We are excited. We're closing out the Friday here, and I think this is a conversation that can do the closing out of Friday some justice.
Let's do it.
My notes here tell me that there's going to be an interesting conversation. So, first off, I ask everyone this, and it's nothing too serious, but what does your origin sort of look like as far as like your origin story? You know, not when you got your superpowers, but like, did you grow up around entrepreneurs? Like, were your family entrepreneur people, or were they working professionals, educational professionals?
Yeah, I love that question, and I actually listened to that on another one of your episodes. Quick answer: I actually was born in a dirt poor family. My grandparents raised me. I was actually in the foster care system for a long time. And I think that formed a lot of my, energy and gusto, but, no background, no heritage from that perspective.
Okay. No, and I respect that. Hey, listen, I'm one of 17 and most of them were in foster homes growing up. So I understand what that looks like.
Wow.
And so where does this, I know where it comes from for me, but where did this drive come from to become a founder, an agency owner?
Yeah, great question. Two things that come to mind. One, I think adversity, I have three young boys, and I have to watch out for doing things for them because no one did that for me. I had to, I got my first job. I had to buy my first car. My grandparents had already raised a family, right? And they were kind of on autopilot. And so I'd say that's a big one. And the other thing is just the way that I'm wired. I'm an engineer. I remember at a young age, we were doing Halloween candy with my grandparents, and we're packing the bags, little goodie bags. And I factoried that thing up. As like an 8-year-old, I loved building systems, even if it was just to pass out, calories. So.
Wow. Okay. And did you end up going to college beyond high school at all, or was that just out of the picture for you?
I like to tell people, my first startup was online staff scheduling for fast food restaurants. There's a website called Mr. Schedule. It's still alive. I don't know how. I left that company about 15 years ago. But I did have a mentor growing up, a guy I really appreciated. He mentored me for about 7 years, worked at Microsoft. And I like to say that my 4-year education, because I just have a high school education, was 4 years of building a SaaS product before SaaS was even an acronym.
Wow.
Kind of filled every role, wrote a ton of code, design, support, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so you're paying your dues and learning what you have to. What does it look like when you start actually building your company? Like, what that was it through your mentor and you working together, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I was great I think I started it when I was 17. So first, great plan was get like 5 other partners, right? I ended up, I great guys, really appreciated them. But I did most of the work, probably about 90% of the work. I was handling everything. And it was just grinding experience, that taught me things. It was, I had no reservations. I didn't know what I was getting into. And so it's like, yeah, let's just build this system. I went up to an owner at my job. I worked at Burger King. And I said, hey, I'd like to be able to check my schedule online because I keep getting harassed when I call in. Well, write it down, please, And he just said, do it. And I was too naive to know what I was getting into. right? So just hit it hard, wrote thousands of lines of code, probably an 800-page book. We brought on restaurants to use the system. We had problems, we had challenges. I had a mental breakdown probably in my late teens, 18, 19, because of the particular challenges that came from that project. But I like to say, later on, I started an agency. For 12 years, I ran an agency, web design. And I think, the best way to learn is by eating concrete. You learn through good experiences, but you don't learn it like when you're banging your head against the wall over and over on a particular experience. So I just say it was over and over, just jumping in and the School of Hard Knocks teaching me one lesson at a time.
Man, there's a lot of truth to be said. And Jason talks about this all the time. I mean, you've got to choose the hard path if you can, because that's the one that makes it easier. When it is an easy time, you don't even feel it. And then when it's a hard time, you still don't feel it because you got to eat the shit sandwich every now and then. As Jason so eloquently puts it at times. And there's a lot of respect to be said for how early you started and what you were trying to accomplish. And that burnout crisis that you had, I mean, that's the earlier the better, because I imagine from that point on, and this is, I think, a good topic to go into, because there is a lot of people who are listening who are business owners, and some of them are probably Friday. I mean, sure, every business owner never has a day off per se. The fire may always be there, but there are some who on Friday, regardless of what the forecast looks like, are going to drive themselves into the ground just to make sure that they're like 2% better, which is not worth the effort if it's only 2%, but they'll do that because that's just how they're built. They're built on reaction mode, right? And Jason and I talk about this a lot. So I'm curious, is that something that after having had that experience when you were late teens, 18, 19, have you worked against that, like making sure that never happens to you again?
Yeah, I mean, that really was a huge moment in my formative business career. I think I learned a lot about setting expectations, because that was part of it. I set horrible expectations because I was a kid. What I was doing, right? And I learned early on, I'm not going to chase the dollar. I want to work really, really smart. I obviously want to be a very, very hard worker, but I want to do it in a way where, I used to tell my wife friends when I was running my agency, I want to make X amount of thousands of dollars a month, $3,000-$4,000 net after everything for 30 years, right? And you compound that over time, and you treat business like a marathon and not a sprint, and it changes everything. 12 years of running my agency, I never had mandatory overtime for my team. I only lost one key employee in 12 years.
Wow.
And a lot of times when we did have overtime, I would pay time and a half or sometimes even double, despite the fact that everyone on my team was salary. And a lot of that can be traced back to my own personal experience, which is like, look, if this isn't fun, if I'm not enjoying myself, if this isn't something that I can build that's going to run smoothly, I don't want to do it. And I think the fruit of that for me, ultimately, before I sold my agency, I had about 5 hours of crucial work a week. I sold at the best of times. And part of that was just because, we never overextended ourselves. I love, I'm dragging on here, but I love Jim Collins when he says, 90% is sustain the core, right? And then 10% is stimulate progress. I love that principle, and I've lived by it.
All right. First of all, thank you for running on and going deeper on that. It's appreciated, especially for a format like this. And you've said a lot of things that I feel like really resonate with the way Jason thinks as well. I want to let him chime in and just give some of his thoughts on that, because a lot of what you said, I mean, it's the book of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's really just it's a learning experience, but the good thing about it in today's world is, you don't have to experience that if you don't want to, right? There's so much information at our fingertips every day.
Right.
There are so many people out there that have already took all those arrows in the back, right? And I would say that my generation above me did a very poor job of that with my generation of business owners, because it always required a check, right? Anything. Well, you want to talk to me for 5 minutes? Well, it's going to cost you $5,000, right? So, and I know a lot of people that are in that mentality, and I'm not saying that's not justifiable, but what I'm saying is as business owners, right? That's what's created the island, right? That created the island.
Sure.
And it's up to us as business owners to be able to interact like this and share valuable information. Information is way more critical than the dollar, right? Yeah. Way more critical. And the sooner people realize that, hey man, if I hop on a call and you got an issue and I can help you through it real quick, Jesus, that should just make you feel good. There doesn't always have to be a check attached to it.
Sure.
And that's part of the reason why we even have this podcast in the first place, right? Is we're being able to do that. And I do resonate with a lot of the things that you said, because I think that, as business owners, we all go through those little points in time in our life, no matter what, sometimes, whether you have the best advice in the world or not, whether you're bullheaded and think you can do it better, there's a million factors in there. So it comes down to, at the end of the day, all those factors can be, they can be tabled if most young founders and CEOs nowadays are willing to just check their ego at the door and say, hey man, I don't know everything, but I do know this, and I know I'm having this problem. Do you have just like 5 minutes and a solution that you could maybe help me out with? Right. You know what? There's not one person that would ever come to me where I wouldn't say, hell yeah, man, let's go.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a big part of the naivety too. It's like you don't know what you don't know, right? And yeah. I think having to make all these decisions on my own, not having trusted people outside of partners that I was engaging with, was very, very difficult. And over time, learning that that's one of the most important lessons is networking and relationships.
Yeah. And the other part of that too is you have to be very careful nowadays who you decide to take advice from, right? Because you've got a slew of COVID coaches everywhere. That's what I call them. They were born in COVID because they lost their job at Burger King. So you got all these self-proclaimed experts running around that really don't know shit about business. So on the same note, yeah, there's a lot of people that are willing to say, oh yeah, I'll help you out. But then again, you got to make sure you vet those people really carefully to make sure you're taking advice from the right people too.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, man. No, and thank you. We're pushing this conversation forward and reminding people, be humble. And the theme of expectations is a big one. I can tell you a number of times I've thought about doing something and I'm like, okay, I'll just start writing it and I'll probably get it done over the weekend, only to find like only 10% of it was actually done. And I'm like, in what planet did I even think? It's like anytime I make a decision personally, I never factor in. I seem to underestimate my family's ability, whether it's my cousins or my siblings. I underestimate their ability to interrupt my life and my work. Should I see it as an interruption? I don't know. But, so every time I factor in how much time it'll take me, I'm factoring if nothing interrupts anything that I'm doing, in a perfect world, I could get this done over the weekend. Is that something that you outgrew during those years? And then that's where you sort of set a healthier expectation? Because that's something I don't know how I still do that at times.
Yeah, I learned so much through that. I remember countless conversations with my agency, with my employees saying, talking about expectation management. I think that's one of the things where we killed it, right? I would teach them, be careful about the words that you say. Don't say, I'm going to get this to you on Friday, because that leaves you no room. Say, my plan is Friday, or I'm hoping for Friday, right? And then paint realistic expectations. We sold websites, right? And there's certain timelines that come because of that. You've got a lot of content you need to get from the customer, a lot of requirements, all that kind of stuff. And I quickly learned that, and frankly, that's why I started a proposal software company, is, a lot of expectations are lined out in your proposal. And I would, coach my team over and over, like, the customer doesn't care that they're paying an extra $1,000. They care that they're paying $1,000 extra because it's completely random to them, right? Had you set expectations and made this to be a scalable line item, right, with some actual terms, then they wouldn't be frustrated at all. In fact, they'd give you $2,000 extra. It's not a big deal. But man, just that moment of failure in my late teens, just feeling like I had really, really failed my other partners. We were months behind where we wanted to be with the software. Just became so intuitive to me over the years.
Yeah, man. And I was going to bring it up at some point coming in here, but I was going to say, so the software you developed, because I see the sign in the back there, that's a smart pricing table. This is the most recent thing that you've been working on.
Yeah, I did that online staff scheduling early on. Worked corporate for a couple of years, did my agency for 12 years, and then I started Smart Pricing Table about a year ago, and it's my full-time gig, business to mostly B2B proposal software is what I'm doing. Really just focused on that, particular niche and, how to make the best proposals and to close more deals.
Yeah. And now is this like a Chrome extension that is used in Google Sheets, or is this like a self-contained client side application?
Yeah, well, you want me to give you a little bit of background on kind of how it was started?
Yeah.
So I was at my agency and I was using a piece of proposal software for probably about 3 or 4 years. And I was really struggling because the darn thing loaded so slowly. And getting back to the expectation thing, I really like spelling out what the customer is going to get, right? I don't like vague. Vague gives me high blood pressure. Vague turns into an ongoing, never-ending project, right? And so what we did in this other software is we defined all these line items. These are the things that we sell. Here's what's included. Here's what's not included. Here's some potential related upsells. And just was building that out and used it for years, but I got to the point where it was taking like 60 seconds to load the darn thing. It was so extensive. And I talked with my team and I said, hey, why don't we create the price table of the proposal? Why don't we create a piece of software for that? We always did that. I always told folks that our technology kind of outsized our size as a company. And we were planning on just creating that pricing table, options and interactivity and all that kind of stuff. Well, one step led to another, and eventually we had this full-fledged proposal software that we'd written just for ourselves. I used it for 4 years, personally closed Bluetooth.com using it. We did their website, Scantron, just a huge success for my own agency. We had customers that wanted to use it. And finally, whenever you're trying to start a business, when you own a business, it's like impossible, right? We get a big project that would land and I'd never get to it. Finally, a year ago, I ended up kind of being at a place of what do I want to do next? And been doing that, just hitting it really, really hard. So it was a piece of software we used that I wanted to take to the market.
I love that. For me, those are my favorite stories where it's someone who specifically had a problem and then looked for a solution and all the solutions didn't work. They're like, we can make a better solution. And so you did. It's, people may feel a certain kind of way about him right now, but I liken it to Elon was trying to find an affordable battery for the electric vehicle and then found that everyone was charging him insane prices. So then he made his own, and then the same thing followed suit with rockets and certain parts of it that were designed automatically to fail so it could be turned into a consistent business forever. And so this idea of having a problem you face yourself and then creating a solution for it, and you're your own best customer, this means that you're always going to have your pulse on any innovations that are necessary to make the product better. Do you take the customer first approach where if the users that you do have that have adopted the solution as their solution for their business, do you have like a community, that forum where they consistently submit ideas and tickets to you saying, oh, it'd be great to have this user feedback sort of?
Yeah, we definitely take user feedback all the time. Most of it comes through email. I like to, one of the things I've learned is it harkens back to reading the E-Myth. But it's really important, I think, for me as a CEO to be close to the product. So I take a lot of that feedback myself because I need to filter it through, 1,000 different conversations I've had over the last year. But I love iterating. I love trying to get to the bottom, like what's behind this? What are you actually trying to accomplish with this feature? Because maybe we don't need to create anything. Maybe we don't need to adjust it. You just need to think a little bit differently. Or maybe, this is what you're trying to accomplish, but hey, this is a way to, build a new feature that would be a blessing to all of our customers, right?
I'm religious with the products that I use. I constantly give feedback just because I'm like, wow, this product's so great. I wonder if it could do this. And oftentimes I do end up realizing I just need to think differently about the way I'm using it because I'm trying to make this product act like the other product when it's not. But if you follow the thinking or the thinking behind the design of the application itself or the software, you'll find that it solves the problem or it removes something you shouldn't even be thinking about anymore anyways. So it's really interesting. It's interesting to get that other side of it because I don't know how many other entrepreneurs that might be listening have a favorite product and they have their team submit, wish we could do this because they're not going to scale. I mean, you actually have history in developing products, right? Not all entrepreneurs are in SaaS, right? So it's some people are allergic to technology and they're like, I don't know. I get my team to do it. And great. I text people, I make phone calls and I show up for conferences. Right. Everything else is not my problem. That's what I pay people for. Sure. Jason's like, that's me. So if you had to say like the smart pricing table was for anyone in particular, who would it be for?
Yeah, professional services are a really good mix. I think there's a lot of products in the market because there's a lot of different needs, right? And proposal software, lots of solutions out there. I think for my software, I like you have a product that you can define, put some limitations, and then also some upsell opportunities. And I feel like it fits really well with professional services. I have a ton of agencies as customers, SEO companies, web design. But I think it also reaches out to, PR, and can even go, into things like, home, contractors, electricians, plumbers, all that kind of stuff. And the big thing is it provides interactivity. It gives your customer a sense of control. And allows them to kind of design the project to a degree with you, so you don't have to go back and forth so much.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. It's anything that pushes people away from email,
yeah,
like from an unnecessary amount of back and forth emails. I 100% am behind. Oftentimes, half the battle with a proposal and why it's so dreadful to so many people is because of the back and forth and trying to iterate and get what's going on. And those have been the running themes of this conversation: the management of expectations of the self and of the work, and how to set them for people that you are working with. So I think it's a really valuable conversation to be had, so that people who are ending the day around this hour, if they're listening at the same time as it's essentially being recorded, but post the date, if they're listening to this on an end of the week drive, and they're sitting there reflecting on their day and how it went, it's worth it to ask yourself, what does my tech stack look like? Is it serving my needs? Am I paying for a software that I don't need, but my team convinced me we did, and then we never used it? Lord knows every business owner has at least two things they're paying for, they just don't use, and
Sure.
it is just there, right? And the other is, am I maximizing the communication channels that I have? I mean, these are all things that I feel like are so important to reflect on. Like I've been trying to get more into writing on tablets and digital devices, and instead of like writing on paper, because I've tried that before, and then I end up with 3 different notebooks, and organization is crazy. So anytime I talk to a software developer, someone who is designing workflows,
Right.
for me, I'm always geeking out and trying to figure out as much of the thinking behind what went into it. And I think that although it's a brief conversation that we had on it, it's important to know that that's something you're working on, and that that's an alternative that people have, because let's face it, competition is healthy, for everyone, pushes innovation. And I'll have to check out your product. But with that said, I want to check in with Jason to hear any of his thoughts before we move on to the latter half of things.
Yep, I am that guy on all accounts, including paper. Still that guy, right? I grew up my dad, he was a farmer. My mom ran multiple restaurants and stuff in town, and clothing stores and all that kind of stuff, right? And I remember as a kid, nowadays we have all this technology, hit print, there's your P&L. And I remember my dad, his P&L was in a red, remember those old red covered notebooks that we'd get when we were kids, right? The cheap ones, right?
Yeah. 100-page college rule.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And my dad would have that lined out. It looked just like a P&L, only it was in writing. He didn't even know what a P&L was. I don't even, I'm sure it still existed then with the big companies, but if you'd asked him what's a P&L, he'd be like, what the hell is that? These are my books. Right. Right. And there's something to be said about that. I mean, I love technology too, but I have a technology director to take care of that. So, but I myself, I always say that, I'm not very tech savvy. It's actually pretty far from the truth, actually, but because I figure if I play stupid, then I know when people are lying to me, right? But I embrace technology. It's a great thing. I think it's great what you guys are doing. And I love that innovation is always born out of necessity. Most of it is, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a problem identified and you're like, man, how can I solve that problem? And then you look for a solution to solve the problem. And then, you solve the problem, and then that solution ends up creating money. Not always, but sometimes it's an internal function that gets corrected and you're like, awesome. I had a project one time, because I give a lot to Homes for Heroes, and a buddy of mine, he was enrolled in Homes for Heroes, and he had no arms and no legs, got them blown off in a IED in Iraq. And I thought, man, how could we fix that? And I sat down and I drew up the plans for the cabinetry that will push away from the wall and come down to your level. So, and then we made him this specific mouthpiece that he could put in, and he could grab stuff so he could feel like he was mobile, right? And a lot of people ask, because today it's kind of a common thing. And people ask me today, they're like, God, why didn't you patent that? And I'm like, well, somebody did. clearly that's not why I came up with it in the first place. I was just trying to solve a problem for a friend.
Right.
And then we turned that over to the general contractor that was in charge. And then I'm sure they were all like, whoa, yeah, we're gonna, and now you can buy them that way now. So, but I love the innovation is always driven by necessity. And that's what you've done. And that's when you live on the bleeding edge, especially in the SaaS world.
Yeah, and when you need something yourself, it's so you really own it. It's kind of like I've invested in real estate over the years. My tenants will never care about my properties as much as I do, right? In the same way, we had a 6-year head start on Smart Pricing Table because we had already owned it. We had used it. We had gotten so much value out of it because it was ours. And that it's such a huge impact on a product or a service.
Especially when you get to break it for 6 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's even better.
Oh, man.
It's fun. Actually, the last 4 years of owning my agency, I did almost zero sales because the design of the app is really, figure out what you freaking sell. Think through what you actually are going to bring to the market. And I was always panicked about websites are very technical. If I hire a sales guy, is he going to sell a $50,000 website for 10 and a $10,000 for 50? And either way, I can't sleep, right? We worked on it so much and so many iterations over the years where it got to a point where I was hardly even involved because we could work out all those kinks because we owned it.
There it is, man. I mean, it's with software in particular, the potential is limitless right now, and you might find great alternatives to anything on Product Hunt. And they'll be half decent, but the ones that really continue to iterate and really put out a superior product, I mean, those applications stand out, man. And they don't even have to do much marketing to get that loyalty going. People become raving fans and start Reddit threads and everything just because that's how much you solved their problem or empowered them to do something with that. And just look at Notion is one of those products that recently came out in a couple of years that is blowing people out the water. But Notion can't invoice. They try, they really do try, but you can't invoice, you can't proposal with that. It's more like a Wikipedia page that has some kind of spreadsheet function to it, but very limited. That's the closest I could come to it. But now they added AI to it, so we'll see where that goes. But that's just what I'm saying. As far as I can tell, out of all the products that are coming out right now, that one has the biggest loyalty in the last 4 or 5 years of just raving fans. And when you see a product do that, you got to ask yourself, what problem did they face that drove them to launch a company like that?
Right. Yeah.
And so I can't wait to see what you're going to do, because I'm not going to let this be the last time we're in touch. And as we bring things out to a close, before we go there, I want to make sure I give a shout out to one of our supporters that made this conversation a fascinating one possible. And that is Kelly Gordon with Cyberpreneur Inferno. So when we talked about this earlier, the burnout, right? The burnout experience. Well, believe it or not, Kelly Gordon has made painstaking efforts to build a community and a methodology, put them together to prevent burnout. And so you can break free from that cycle and double your agency's revenue in 100 days. That's literally been her goal. And I spoke with her over the phone recently, and she's already working on something new after she mastered that. It's unstoppable what she's doing. But essentially, if the assumption is you were going to start an agency and double your money and double your freedom, and then you found out you had less of both, and you're drinking Red Bulls just to stay alive, and I'm sure it sounds familiar, Joe. But then you end up becoming a fully booked agency with dreams, and you wonder how the hell you got there after years. You can keep doing it yourself and try to break your head against the wall while you're figuring that out, or you can just join the community, the cohort that she's put together with a bunch of other agency owners who already have all the processes, the systems, the mindsets, and they can give you the personal attention you need to help you ship up and shape out. It might be vice versa there. Ship out and shape up. So you could do that. And it's hundreds of them. that she's partnered with. She created something really unique. And all you have to do is go to, I believe it's get.cyberpreneurinferno, and that might be tough to spell, but give it a shot there. get.cyberpreneurinferno.com/4x4, right, the 4x4 method. And let them know the War Room sent you, and they're going to give you a percentage off, 15% off that tuition. It's a program that you have to run through. If they're going to be held up to a guarantee, they're going to need you to hold up your end of the bargain. But I think it's a very fair trade and very worthwhile if you are an agency and you're struggling and you're dealing with burnout as an owner, which I couldn't have picked a better conversation to have that supporter be a part of this. At any rate, I also want to let Joe tell us. And so Joe, please inform us, where can we connect with you further down the line, your preferred channel? And do you have any calls to action that we should know about?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Joe Ardeeser, ARDEESER. Good luck spelling that. You can also just visit me at smartpricingtable.com. That's my SaaS product. I love giving demos. If you think there might be any interest in the product, maybe you've heard some of the things we've talked about in this discussion and might be intriguing, I give demos all the time. And then I have a 30-day free trial. And if you mention this podcast, I'll also give you 50% off your first month after.
Wow.
There you go.
Boom. There you go.
That's how a SaaS product owner moves.
Hey, by the way, some of my biggest growth came from an agency mastermind. So totally propping up that group. I learned so much from people who had done it before, and it was risky, or it was like scary to spend the money. Totally worth it.
Oh, I love that, man.
It was cool though, because the last podcast we had right before this one, it was a toy company, and on the podcast, he goes, you know what, you and Phillip, I'm going to ship you both the toys for free, right, for your kids. And I thought, oh man, that's great. And then I looked it up. Oh my God, they're expensive. I couldn't even believe it. It's like $150 for this toy. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just cool. It's my point is, it's really cool when people like ad hoc just do stuff like that. Like you just did. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. I mean, it just goes to show the respect that the business community has for each other. You know, I've been a part of so many organizations, and the only, whether it's creative and entertainment, things of that nature, and the only group of people that have consistently proven to me to be incredible human beings are business owners and entrepreneurs, like hands down. There's the occasional asshole and nobody knows how they got there, but they also don't last very long. But business owners, by and large, have been the most inspirational, hardest working, innovative, and creative people I've met in my entire life. And I've hung out with, celebrity musicians. So for me, it just blows my mind that entrepreneurs may not think of themselves as artists. And I honestly believe that the best art is a good business deal, man. I mean, that's the Picasso of business deals, man, So I really hope that all of you who are listening, as we begin to close things out, really give yourselves credit for that and realize that same creative faculty just makes more money than someone strumming a guitar sometimes, that's all it is, but it's the same creative faculty. So with that said, Joe, the grand finale, how we close things out is, if you could have invited anybody to this show, any point, place, time in the world, who would you have loved to have had here based on what we covered, and why?
Yeah, so totally random. It'd probably be my 4-year-old son, Jack, just because he's a freaking riot. Total ham. He would have had everyone laughing, and he would have been a lot of fun.
I love that, man. Honestly, I really wished when I was a kid that I had the opportunity to be a part of like a business. I feel like if I would have started earlier, a lot less mistakes that didn't amount to anything. You know what I mean? Because mistakes can be valuable as long as it's strategic, right, and calculated. If it's just random mistakes, you end up with a lot of lost time. And having someone like I'm sure Jack is going to benefit immensely from having your presence and your wisdom and your experience in his life, man. And yet again, I hope business owners really give themselves credit. You are on, as Jason likes to say, the bleeding edge of society. We talk about it all the time on the show. Most entrepreneurs or business owners are totally unemployable simply because they're not willing to sit there and wait if they know it can be done in a day. Just going to do it right now. All the ones that are successful, that's how they are. Meanwhile, there's all this bureaucracy and got to shake a lot of hands and who's permission at other companies. So I really hope that people walk away from this episode jazzed up, because you're living totally different. You're a different breed, and you're the kind of breed that can really make it out in the battlefield, the war on our own self, and overcoming ourselves and getting out there and getting shit done and making lots of money while doing it and supporting our families and making the world a better place. So with that said, I'm going to let Jason close this out, because it is tradition that he closes this out. But Joe, thank you for bringing the energy necessary to have an inspiring conversation, man.
You got it. Enjoyed it so much. Thank you both.
Yeah. Well, hey, I always like to say this, Joe, and that is, we all got the same 168 every week. And thanks for stopping by and spending more than usual, actually, 44 minutes with us today. That says this was a hell of a good episode, actually, for sure. So thanks for stopping by and taking the time to spend with us today. And you just keep rocking, brother.
All righty. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the War Room Roundtable with your hosts, Jason Miller and Phillip Lanos. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and always remember, if you can dream it and believe it, then you can go achieve it. We'll see you in the next episode.